So today's event is part of the Devon Social Entrepreneurs Programme, and it's funded by the Devon Community Renewal Fund and led by the Social Entrepreneurs School at Dartington. So we're really pleased to do that. So while you continue to introduce yourselves, I will introduce our speakers. So first off is Rosanna Wilson, and Team Procurement works with 3 of our Tier 2 local authorities, Teignbridge, West Devon and South Hams district councils. And I know that, Rosanna, you've been working on this for quite a long time, so there's going to be a lot of experience in what you've got to tell us. So over to you if you would like to start with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. I'm just going to share my screen. And there we go. Can everyone see this okay? Yeah, great.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about procurement within rural districts today. And I was asked to discuss the difficulties facing institutional procurement for social value, particularly in awarding contracts to small local businesses, including co-ops, social enterprises, charities. How can some of these be overcome, and what are the gaps or obstacles? So in today's session, very quick session, I'm not going to take too much of your time, but I'm going to be talking about what procurement is, public sector procurement, my role, what we're doing, and our main objectives in terms of local spend, social value, sustainability, and then the summary. And then I believe we're having questions at the end of the workshop, so feel free to save those up. So what is procurement? Procurement and supply goods and services that enable an organisation to operate in a profitable and ethical manner. It's not about the cheapest, but it's about the best value for money. So you might see that in procurement, we do a lot of price and quality analysis, and now we're starting to bring sustainability into the mix as well, and social value. Here is a map of the globe, and you can see that we've got the government procurement agreement. So the purple are the members, and you can see we're in purple, we're a member. We've got negotiating memberships, and we've got observers. Now the government procurement agreement is essentially the basis of why we conduct the way we do within public sector procurement. It's why we have regulations and rules in place compared to a private sector company who may not have to follow the same rules that we do. So the GPA forms the basis of the public contracts regulations in 2015 and Teignbridge District Council's own contract procedure rules. The principles of the GPA are openness, transparency, non-discrimination. Before Brexit, we were part of Europe within that GPA agreement. After Brexit, or post Brexit, we are now a separate member of the GPA. So my role, I'm a shared service across Teignbridge, South Hams and West Devon. I don't have a team, so it's just me, but I do have procurement champions. So I have quarterly or biannual meetings to discuss any procurement updates or any pipelines, or if anyone needs any help within their department, I offer advice to them. I'm also help our tackle company Strata, who are our IT company. I also advise them on their procurement as well. So we've, if you're looking at that map, we've got Dartmoor there, and then we've got coastline. So we've got rural, coast, moorland, and market towns, all the way down to Tavistock. So what are we doing? As well as ensuring that we're adhering to the government procurement agreement in terms of compliance, there are several other objectives we need to adhere to. These are created from policies such as the National Procurement Strategy. We've also got the Devon District Procurement Strategy. And we also have within Teignbridge South Hams and West Devon, we've got the Sustainable Procurement Policy and Procedure. And within the Sustainable Procurement Policy and Procedure, that encompasses social value as well. And our three main objectives at the moment at Teignbridge, South Hams and West Devon are improving local spend, improving social value, and improving sustainability. So in terms of local spend, what are we doing? Previously, we had our contract procedure rules stated that we needed to procure our contracts on a portal called Proactis. Now we've introduced a portal called Supply Devon, and we are using Supply Devon for anything up to £100,000. So this falls into the request for quotation remit. Anything over £100,000 needs to be an open tender, or we'd use a framework. So we're hoping to capture more local spend by starting to procure anything under 100,000 through this new portal, Supply Devon. It's run by Applegate, and it was created from the Sustainable Innovation Grant, I believe it was. That's how it's come about. We've been using it for a couple of months now. I absolutely love it. It works on the basis of you put your quote out there, you put your request quotation document out there. If there are suppliers within Teignbridge, then it will invite those within Teignbridge that match your needs and your categories. If not, after a week or so, or however long you've put the request for quotation out there, it will then go on to the next tier, and it will expand your radius to the Devon district, and we've been having a lot of success there. There's not been one, touch wood, there's not been one opportunity where we haven't had any responses. So really really happy with this new portal that we're using, and we're hoping that next year we'll be able to see that this is working in terms of increasing our local spend. What else are we doing? So previously, if we had anything under £10,000 within our contract procedure rules, we would say to officers within the councils that you need to go away, do a Google search, and do verbal or informal written quotations, i.e. an email, and find your best value for money that way. That's good, but the problem there is we may not be capturing suppliers who are out there and may not be on Google, or everyone has this SEO that they talk about. I think it stands for search engine optimization, and those larger companies who have IT departments will increase their SEO and they will appear on Google. But if you've got a sole trader down the road who may not have a website, or is not that present on the internet, then we have now built on our website, Teignbridge. So hopefully this sole trader that I'm talking about, as an example, will still have internet. He may not have a website, but he still has internet, and he can hypothetically, or she can go onto the our Teignbridge website and register as a supplier. Now, this doesn't guarantee business with Teignbridge, but what this does is it feeds into a database that Strata, our IT department, have built for us. And this database contains all the suppliers that have registered, and then officers can go to the database, and if someone wants, if someone wants, let's say we want some pens. I mean, that's an example. I know that we have a contract of stationery, but let's say we want some pens, and we've got a supply. We do a search for pens within this database, and we've found these suppliers. Then the officer can go to those suppliers and get their quotes. So it's just more of a way of capturing those local smaller businesses. So in terms of data, our local spend when I joined the council in 2019 was around about 15% for Teignbridge and 50% for Devon. Early analysis of the 21-22 spend, so that's up until 31st of March 2022, it indicates that these figures have improved. I would really like to share these figures with you, but they haven't been shared to my senior leadership team yet, so I can't share those with you, but are hoping to share these with you in the future. So in terms of social value then, there are several options to improve social value. I'm of the thought that we've got the local spend, we've done everything we can on local spend now. Let's go to our next agenda, which is social value. So there are several options that I've been researching to improve social value. There's the social value portal, which is a fantastic system that links to Proactis, where we release our tenders, and it can analyze how much social value we are bringing to our contracts. However, option number 2 is What Impact, a company called What Impact, which is a fantastic idea, and it looks like a very good portal. Actually matches, so the only way I can think of it is like, and I apologize if no one knows what I'm on about, but if you take a dating app and you get matches with people, that's what Impact do. So they take the voluntary sectors, the charities, and the smaller businesses, and they match these with the suppliers that have put in a bid for our opportunity. What they will do is they will talk to the companies before they put in the bid, so that they can really demonstrate that, yes, I've spoken to this company, I've spoken to ABC charity, they have confirmed that, yes, we can work with them, and this, we're going to do X, Y, and Z for them. So they're really, that's option number 2. Option number 3, which is the cheapest option because it doesn't cost any money, is creating our own calculation built on the themes, outcomes, and measures, also known as TOMs. So there's a link there if anyone wants to see the TOMs in action. As of yet, as it stands, not really sure which direction I'm going to go in, but at least we have options. At least that it's not the case that we don't have any options. On top of that, we also receive updates from the Southwest Social Value Task Force as well. So that helps me keep up to date on social value activities. I believe it's quite a new task force, but I'm hoping that as we receive updates, it can ensure that I'm keeping on track in terms of social value for the procurements in Teignbridge, South Hams and West Devon. So in terms of sustainability then, our final aspect we're going to talk about, some improvements to sustainability can be a byproduct of other objectives. For example, increasing our local spend results will mean a reduction in travel for suppliers, and that's great. I've been working with the climate change officers at South Hams and Teignbridge on our Scope 3 emissions. Now, Scope 3 emissions, I'm going to be honest with you, is still quite new. I mean, when Greta Thunberg came out and gave this fantastic speech, I was sold, but it's a lot of learning and research that I need to do in terms of Scope 3 emissions, because a majority of our spend does fall into scope 3 emissions. So I'm hoping to work with the climate change officers, and also there's a talk about a working group led by Exeter University, as they are very knowledgeable in this area, and I believe a working group on sustainability would really benefit both me and others. Possibly a working group for social value, who knows. So what are the challenges, and how can these be overcome? The challenges are making the procurement process as easy as possible. You know, there can be a few forms to fill in. You know, sometimes the technology may not be user friendly. Number 2, making procurement understandable. So I'm hoping now that I've spoken about public sector procurement and the GPA. You are all experts in the area, and there will be a quiz at the end. No, there won't be really. I'm just joking. That's another challenge that we have. Third challenge, balancing sustainability with social value. So, you know, we've got, if I may have 2 stakeholders who want to do a project, and one stakeholder, for the same project, one stakeholder will say, well, social value is really important to me, and then the other stakeholder will say, well, sustainability is really important to me. So we will incorporate that into our quality questions when we go to the analysis. But then what about price? What about the method statement? What about experience? You know, you're eating into that extra quality there. So it is a big balancing act, and it sometimes can be difficult to overcome. How can these challenges be overcome? Using the resources out there, promotion of procurement. So for example, we have Meet the Buyer Days within the Southwest, and you know, that's where suppliers can come and learn about procurement and what we do and how to do business with us. Matching charities in the voluntary sector to suppliers, so the what impact scenario that I talked about. And if anyone else has any more thoughts on how we can overcome these challenges, then please do mention that at the end when we have our questions. So in summary, public sector procurement requires compliance, openness, transparency, and non-discrimination. At the council, we've got 3 objectives: the local spend, improving social value, and sustainability. Work's already been done on improving the local spend, and now it's time to focus on social value and sustainability. And we'll need to work with climate change officers and other departments in order to reach our objectives. And I just did a little drawing there for you. Sustainability and social value are a balancing act with procurement on the tightrope. So that's my quote, and I'm expecting like a little quotation of that. Oh, someone's clapping me. Thank you, Ian. Anyway, that's me. I am going to stop sharing now. And thank you all for listening. Are we doing questions at the end, Gill?
I'd like to move on to hear what Phil has got to say, because I think some of the questions might be ones you might both want to comment on.
That's fine.
So thank you very much, Rosanna. That was excellent and very thought-provoking. And I see that we have some comments in chat already about what you've said. So great to hear about that. Chanel says there's a uni working group on scope 3 things. And Phil, we're very glad to hear from you about the trends at Plymouth City Council. Please carry on and tell us about them.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me. And next time I don't want to be following Rosanna, so apologies in advance. So Rosanna's gone over public procurement, so you're all experts, as she said. So I won't recover the thresholds and the regulations that we have to abide by in such depth. But what I'll start on is with my slides, but there we go. Where we are. So the question asked to me was how Plymouth City Council secures social environmental value in our spending, so in our procurement work. So I would say we're still very early on in our journey, and it's a journey for all public entities, and everybody's at a different stage. So whereas Rosanna was just going over the options that she's got to her to her group in terms of how they go about social value, we're maybe one step further in the fact that we've chosen a route. So I'll just start off by covering off where we were with the last 2 years and how we've gone about things in that time. So during obviously the last 2 years, we've had the COVID pandemic, and during that time, we as a council enacted what was our Resurgam regeneration plan, and one of the pillars of that was a spend for Plymouth. This had a couple of key areas of focus, which was driving the buy local agenda and maximising social value. So when we talk as a council as driving buy local agenda, we define that as anywhere with a PL postcode, effectively, which is not necessarily Plymouth, as we all know in the region. We stretch down as far as Cornwall and nearly as up, stretching into Devon proper. So we look at it that way because of, if we're looking at what benefits Plymouth, that is spending obviously within our Plymouth area, but obviously surrounding areas will contribute into that growth and well-being of the city in general anyway. So that's what we did on ballots. We had a nice plan. We had commitments to increase spending locally by around 10% over the 2 years, which I'm glad that we achieved. So currently we spend about just over 54% of our total procurement spend is with local, who we define as local businesses. The next part of that was boosting social value. Wrong slide. There we go. Was boosting social value. So, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But it's good to one of the things we did as part of our buy local agenda was reassess our internal regulations. So obviously we've got the procurement contract regulations as a whole when the GPA threshold is enacted, but below that, each council has a set of rules themselves to guide them on how they go about their business. So for us, ours is called the contract standing orders, but basically based upon the contract regulations, but obviously a little bit more flexible because of the value points involved. So with that, to help boost buy local, we reassessed where we were, and I'll just bring up this slide. It's what, and you don't need to read it all, but it's basically what we must do as a procurement department based on the value points. And the key bit is the first column, which is how we go about quotations and tenders. So at the different value points there, before we had it a little bit more inflexible, but now it's seeking free formal quotations right up to the GPA threshold as a minimum, whereby at least 2 out of the 3 must be from a local organisation. So it's all about, we obviously as a public entity, we can't just choose a business because they're local, but we can ensure that we're inviting as many local businesses to the opportunity as possible. Thus, by they may get it because of the greater chance, because greater number of volume of organisations locally are being invited, but also by the experience of doing it, that with the feedback that we give at the end of our tenders, won or lost, that you can learn to be better and we can start that dialogue in that sense. And also, the amount of forms that are involved at each stage. So below the threshold, we try as we may to keep the forms simplistic and minimal, and because we know that with the smaller organisations, you may not have a dedicated bidding team, which we try and not make that a disadvantage. So coming back to social value then, we as a council define it as a process whereby the organisation procures and commissions goods, services and works in a way that achieves value for money on a whole life basis in terms of generating benefits to society and the economy whilst minimising damage to the environment. So that's a mouthful. But basically, it's all the good stuff that you're doing. And you are doing it, or organisations are doing it it's just not recorded or not evaluated on those good things. So if an organisation is employing a local person, they're adding social value. But if we don't set up a process or a framework to be able to collect that information and evaluate that business based on it, then yes, it's still happened. But the point of social value is putting it into the evaluation part is that we're ensuring that that's a good thumbs up, and that's, you know, you're getting marks as part of your evaluation for doing that, because that's sort of behaviours that we want to promote. And obviously then by them winning the business, it encourages that sort of behaviour going forward as well. So there's a couple other key outcomes there of our policy to, you know, is to maximise opportunities from our spend with suppliers in a way that makes possible a positive social, economic and environmental outcome. So by doing this and building it into our tendering framework, it will hopefully have that effect. Moving on. So the aims of the policy is social contributions, economic and environmental. So social is helping to tackle deprivation and social inequalities and overturning social exclusion. Economic, promotion or creating of local jobs or training opportunities. Environmental, supporting key environmental initiatives, like we've had one, it's plastic-free Plymouth. And others, which we'll go over in a minute. So how does the council apply the policy? So obviously there is the overarching act, which was the Public Services Social Value Act of 2012, which is telling us to take it into account in our tendering provisions. The way that us as a council have written our social value policy is that if the value of the tender sits below the respective threshold, GPA threshold, then it is a discretionary requirement to include it as part of tender opportunities. Where we say that it's discretionary is because it's got to, all procurement, it has to be appropriate to what we're purchasing and with the timelines and things like that. So sometimes it may not be beneficial to put it in. There may be reasons, but for that we record it so that we can learn from it. And maybe adjust the way that we approach it next time that tender opportunity comes about. Above the respective GPA threshold, then it is a mandatory requirement to include social value evaluation weightings. How we look at it as well, that where it is included, the evaluation weighting must be between 5 and 25% of the overall evaluation mark. So Rosanna was touching on it earlier with price, quality, and sometimes you'll see it as part of quality questions. Ours sits outside and it will be price, quality, social value, and that makes the 100% evaluation mark add up. So it's there as its separate section. Next. So in offence, that's just the flow of how we would look about it. So is the value of a tender above the threshold? Apologies for still having overdue there. And that's sort of the decision-making route that we would go through. So we would work with our internal client to identify which social value considerations we're going to include, verify them, add them, the outcomes in the specification, confirm the weightings, and then conduct the tender exercise in a very short form way of illustrating it, basically. How we do the social value, we did option 3 from Rosanna's list, which was to use the TOMS, the social value portal TOMS, but we created our own framework. It is the TOMS, but we chose not to use their online portal system and integration into pro-rata tendering. For the reasons of it costs money, which we didn't have at the time, plus you get the added benefits. We feel as though it's tailored to us. We've got more flexibility to change it whenever we want, and plus we can change the way it's presented to the bidders, in the fact of trying to make it as easy as possible to complete. And we felt at the time that the online portal is another login that somebody's got to do. It's another portal somebody's got to learn how to do. It's another contact route with somebody. So having it all as part of suite of tender documents. It's all there in one place. If you've submitted everything as part of our tender docs, you've submitted everything. You don't need to worry about it. So we were conscious of that. But the TOMs in general, they've got a few themes here: jobs, growth, social, environment. Innovation is basically freehand one, so if there's any ones that we wanted to add in general. But it covers all the stuff that you would expect to see. So I won't go in depth, but everything here is what you'd expect to see as part of anybody's sort of social value policy. You know, more local people in employment as an outcome, more opportunities for local SMEs and VCSEs, creating a healthier community, about carbon emissions are reduced. So I will just flip to our sheet to show you what I mean. Now, hopefully that's still, is this showing an Excel sheet now? Because I've just changed program. Is that all right? Yeah, bro. So this, for appearance sakes, on a presentation, what I've gone on is saying that the way we do it is easier. Now, this spreadsheet is going to look complicated, but I guarantee you, when you have it in front of you, it does make things easier. So this is a long list of 128 top evaluation questions that we could use. When the bidder sees this, it will be probably 5 to 10 measures. So it's 5 columns, 5 rows on a spreadsheet. So it's very easy for them because we've already chosen the ones that we want, which are applicable to that opportunity. But in effect, so this top one, I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see it a bit more clearly. The first one on here is, as a measure, is number of direct local employees, FTE, hired or retained on contract for 1 year or the whole duration of the contract, whichever is shorter. If we were to ask that, basically what we're asking is somebody to fill in this blue box and say, yeah, I'm going to employ 5 people on that, on this opportunity. So I'm going to commit to employing 5 local people, FTE, on this opportunity. That then sums up to what will be just over £129,000 worth of representative money of social value contributions to the local area, which is great. It's, you know, you're employing somebody, that's great, and then that person's getting a wage from that local business and then spending their wage with local businesses, hopefully, because they're a local person, which then has this roll-on effect. That's brilliant. And then we ask for them to give us the delivery plan. If they're not employed, or if they're employed already, that's great. Just tell us your postcode of them, how many, what's their FTE percentage, because it could be 5 people over 5 FTEs over 10 people, for instance, doing 0.5 FTE. And tell them the postcodes. If it's a delivery plan that you're going to recruit, tell us how you're going to recruit, and that's evidence then as part of your commitment. I know it just says qualitative statement, but to that, it gives every single one the definition of what we mean, our target guidance, and what our evidence requirements are for every single one. So all the information's there on the page for everybody when they're doing it. You know, other ones are directed at total amount spent within the local supply chain within the contract. So if you're doing big construction works, it's great that maybe 80% of the bidder's supply chain is local, because then we're giving, hopefully, to a local business first off with the bidder. If they're not a local business, at least their supply chain is local. And then the evidence would be, what are you going to spend, who are you going to spend it with, what's the, you know, what business is this? So, and then it all adds up. So at the end of it, you get you get a total representative value. At the moment, because I've only done one column, it's sitting at just over £129,000 worth of social value contributions, and that's great. And that's our quantity. What we'd look at the quantitative side of it. We also look at the qualitative side, which is assessing what you put in your delivery plan or method statement for them as well. So we're interested in, yes, it's going to generate some social value in terms of representative money value, but also that how you're going to deliver it, or the way you're delivering it, is appropriate, or, you know, it's achievable. It's not just a tick box exercise. You need to give us you need to give us the meat of how it's going to be achieved, so we can assess you on that as well. Else, if we didn't have the qualitative side, it would just be a tick box, and somebody ticking all the boxes and putting the highest value in would win every time. It's that sort of checks and balances side of it.
Phil, we're
really interested in.
wondering if you can round off in the next couple of minutes. That's okay.
Yep, no worries. I'll round it up. So yeah, so this is just an example of it. I suppose we'll send them out, but we look at how we look at qualitative side of it as well as the quantitative side of it. This is all the definitions and guidance which are within the actual tool itself. We do it in the same way we would evaluate our price and our quality sections, so it's consistent, so there's nothing new to understand. It's all laid out within the tender documents. We've got some do's and don'ts, but I'll send those out afterwards. But just important things, just so I can wrap, where we were before this and before the drive, we spend about 10% more locally than we ever did before. We're sitting at around 23 to 24% spending with SME businesses in the year, not the financial year, but year ending September 2021. We had achieved commitments towards around £2.5 million worth of social value, which was of the contracts that included social value, that was sitting at about 34%, whereas the generally accepted good looks around 20%. We've increased our unique supplier base within our local entity to 60%. So we, of our spend, 60%. Of our 54% local spend, 60% of it is with unique suppliers. So it's not just with the same people we're spending money with. But yeah, I think that's about it as I'm rounding it up. Yeah, we're part of all the same groups that Rosanna is. So apologies for a bit fraught at the end, but time got the better of me. But hopefully I'll ring it up. Any questions when we do the questions bit? So apologies.
Thank you so much, Phil. Those are very impressive statistics that you finished with. And it's good to know that that's happened. And sorry to rush you, really, because there was a lot of good information there. And we look forward to being able to circulate your slides. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think there was some great do's and don'ts there as well for enterprises. So we already have 1 or 2 questions in chat, and please feel free to use your hand up signal if you would like to ask a question. Yeah, perhaps we could kick off with Amy's question, and her number 1 is, could either of you comment on how to embed social value on the planning process or planning applications? How does that work, and does that get included already, or is there a method?
So Amy's question. So generally they are separate. Neighbourhood plans and application process are separate, and what you'll find with a lot of councils is the fact that it always starts with procurement. Procurement is always the first to embed social value, and then it branches out into the sort of planning arenas, whether that be project planning, so that you would see it if we're making a building complex with shops at the bottom and apartments above, where we would try and embed social value into the planning agreement, so that, say, an SMEs were part of the lease agreements of the shops, or that X amount of apartments were to be to underprivileged families, or at a lower rent. You could work things into planning section in that sense of buildings and things like that. In terms of planning, in terms of planning applications and neighbourhood plans, they generally are separate, but there would be sustainability as a more holistic approach as part of those neighbourhood plans, or I forget the official name of it, because we've got it's the joint local plan, which branches over Devon, Team, Plymouth as well, which there's a more holistic sustainability in the way that's approached there. I don't know, Rosanna, if you wanted to add to that.
No, yeah, I think you've covered everything really. Yeah, we've got the joint local plan is what I was going to touch on, but yeah, you've mentioned it.
I think we had a question from you, Paul. Did you want to ask that?
Yes, sorry, happy to. I just dropped it in chat actually, but I was just an observation really that a lot of the measures and the mission, if you like, was defined in terms of either economic or social or ecological, but didn't seem to be framed contextually in the context of sustainability, and that being a measure in terms of assessing, and I just wondered if that's something that is in development or is in there but not expressively drawn out in the way that you've sort of presented it.
It might have got lost in me rushing, so apologies. So yeah, you've got those quite defined sections, but the environmental section does touch on a lot of things which would sort of come into the same sustainability side of it. But we are also we've worked with our ethnicity and diversity team. We're working with our environmental experts and our climate change project team as well to identify which ones which would best affect and reach our council's sustainability goals as well, so that we'd work on those as these are the ones which must be included every time, and also working with them to develop some of original ones which would come into that innovation section when we can add what one's freehand. We also have separate sections as part of our quality assessment. It's just the fact that social value branches out as its own sort of section now. So within our quality section, we would be asking things about environmental sustainability and all these things as well, but in a way that would not, in effect, double up what we're doing in the social value side. So, Rosanna touched on it. It's sometimes a bit of a balancing act where it appears, but it generally does appear in most instances. Yeah,
I mean, we do ask the sustainability question. There's no generic question, but we tend to make it proportional to what the project is. But our climate change officers are doing the analysis of our emissions, but we've also been asked the question to ask suppliers of their emissions as well. But this is the problem with the balancing act, because if we go to Bob down the road, who's a sole trader, local, compared to big London corporate company who has a bid writing team who can access and do all the carbon calculations that they use, you're then getting your sustainability piece, but you're losing out on that social value piece. So it's yeah.
I guess just slightly, you sort of highlighted a little bit of a concern, I guess, in the context of there's a lot of interpretation of sustainability as being about the ecological issue. I'm talking more about, we have a heavy focus on economic growth and consumption, and that in itself isn't sustainable. So if we're targeting economic growth, it's how do we do that in a sustainable way, and people and ensure that any jobs created, for example, out of contract opportunities, are sustainable in their own right as well, so that you generally build that circular economy activity. So it's a balance. I get where you're coming from, the ecological side, but I'm looking more at the other wider issue of sustainability, just in terms of the economic and social change and shift as well.
Absolutely, and I could be here all day talking about that, because it's very difficult to even calculate it. At the moment we're calculating truly local using matching up Devon and Teignbridge postcodes with the postcodes on our creditors list. But what about the we don't truly know how much is being created. So for example, if we've got a travel lodge in Newton Abbot, and then we're paying travel lodge who are based in London, but think about all the jobs that have created in Newton Abbot from this travel lodge. It's a minefield, and that's what needs to be done. You know, a calculation or an equation needs to be done that we can calculate this. You know, I know it can be done, just an academic needs to do it.
It's a very difficult issue, and that's great to have that raised. So now I'm aware of 3 things that it would be great to hear of next. And Chanel, I see that you've got a question, but just on this specific issue, I just wondered if Lewis, you might want to say something about it, because Paul said, you know, how do we build an economic growth and so forth. And I understand that you've been working on a project researching another way of measuring and looking at that. And then I'm also going to go to Beth. Thank you for joining us, Beth, from Supply Change, which is aiming to help authorities and institutions to do that introduction of social value and greenness in their supply chain. So Lewis, do you want to say a word about what you're doing?
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, hello everybody. And apologies, I do have to go in a minute, so I'm not being rude, but I do have another meeting at 1:30. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity for, you know, just to say a few words, because I think what I'm working on with lots of people within Devon County Council is really relevant to this conversation. And I'll put my contact details in the chat if anybody is interested in having a conversation around that going forward. Please contact me, because I'd love to kind of learn from you guys, and if I can help anyway, then I will. So essentially what it is a tool which allows decision makers, so in procurement would be, you know, people who are procuring stuff, to identify the value and impacts across a whole range of domains, both environmental and social, and it helps people to think more long-term as well as short-term about their decision making, and it is loosely based on concepts around comes from Kate Rayworth's donut economics model. So yeah, and that's it really. I mean, one of the questions, or one of the things I was going to just touch on, was, Rosanna, when you were talking about the balancing act, that really resonated with me. And I think how I've come to think of it is more of, how can we maximize value in both social and environmental spheres? Because it'd be good to have a conversation about it, because is it necessarily a balancing act? I think that would be my question. And maybe it is in certain circumstances, but I think I'm seeing it somewhat differently through the work that I've done.
Thank you very much, Lewis. I imagine you might be having some conversations with Peter Lafort as well. I know they've been using the donut decision wheel concept when he was working in Cornwall.
Yeah, and what I'm doing is inspired by that work, yeah.
Excellent. Well, do tell us some more about it. We'd really like to discuss it some more as time goes on. And Beth, I'd like to give you a chance to say, I'm sorry, Beth, you have to go fairly soon too. So sorry to delay you, Chanel, but we will come to you. So Beth, would you like to tell us a bit about Supply Change and what you're doing?
Yes, if it's okay, I'll just share my screen and show you a bit about what we do. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. Supply Change is a social enterprise that aims to increase the number of other social enterprises in public and private sector supply chains. We were founded 3 years ago when myself and my co-founders were researching what the barriers were to social procurement in the public sector and what were the opportunities. We spoke to procurement teams and social enterprises across the public and private sector. And what we realised was there were a number of different issues at stake when it comes to social procurement. For example, social enterprises needing access to funding to grow in order to be able to meet the requirements of public sector contracts, and also kind of perceptions around social enterprises perhaps being more risky and not being able to deliver the same quality as a commercial supplier. And there were already solutions out there, like grant funding and social investment, as well as capacity building incubators and accelerators. But one area that we felt there was a bit of a gap in the market was how to increase the accessibility and visibility of contracts opportunities to social enterprises. And that is where Supply Change decided to focus our work. So we have developed different services aimed at helping remove barriers to social procurement for public and private sector suppliers. We offer lots of different services. We help with things like opportunity analysis, where we analyse the spend of buyers to understand where in their supply chain are opportunities to switch to social enterprise suppliers. We have our own platform of pre-vetted social enterprise suppliers that procurement teams can access to ensure that they find the right social enterprise suppliers for their goods and services, and that they can trust they have been vetted by our team. And we also connect buyers and suppliers virtually at Meet the Buyer networking events, which is a great way of meeting social enterprises face to face, engaging with them early before the tendering process, and changing those perceptions around social enterprises. And we also support with kind of training around social procurement as social enterprise, and also how to measure your impact once you do start engaging with social enterprises as well. Something that I also wanted to just quickly highlight today, as I know there's not much time and this may be relevant to some of you on the call, is that last year we launched a dynamic purchasing system alongside Orbit Housing, who are a large housing association based in the Midlands. And what's different about this dynamic purchasing system is that all the suppliers on the framework are either voluntary, charitable or social enterprise suppliers. And it is completely compliant with UK procurement legislation, because last year the Public Procurement Policy Note 1120 was published, which states that for goods and services below the threshold of 122,000, contracting authorities are allowed to reserve contracts for SMEs or VCSEs. So we have set up this dynamic purchasing system to allow contracting authorities to use their ad hoc lower value spend and make sure they can channel it towards social impact suppliers. We've already managed to channel £100,000 of spend from Orbit through it, and it's now being used by Worcestershire City Council, and we're looking to expand it out to other contracting authorities who want to pilot the dynamic purchasing system. There are over 20 lots on the system. There's different types of suppliers, from anything from catering to cleaning to consultancy services. And as I said, it's completely compliant, and the social enterprises and the charities on there are ready to respond to your tenders. So it's helping to remove that barrier of accessibility and visibility to social enterprise suppliers. We've managed to redirect in total across our services £300,000 towards social enterprises, and this is just a range of some of the organisations we've worked with, so a mixture of public and private sector buyers. That is all for now. I'm conscious that we only had a small slot, but those are my contact details. If you're interested in any of the work we're doing or finding out more about the DPS, which I should say is also completely free to use, we take a commission from the contracts awarded through it, then yeah, please get in touch with me on my email address, but I will stop sharing now.
Thanks very much, Beth. That's very interesting to hear. And thank you also to Lewis. I know both of you have to go any minute now, but we really appreciate it. And I hope that we can continue this conversation and hear more about how this is going as time goes on. New Prosperity Devon would like to promote what you're both doing.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to go back very quickly to Chanel, because you had a question pending. And after that, we just have a couple of very brief polls that we'd like to ask you to answer before you go into the breakout groups. So Chanel, would you like to ask?
Sorry, I've just typed it in the chat because I'm going to have to leave. But I just wanted to make the point really, because I think it's been quite a few things have come up in the questions and also in the discussion. And I think it's important to note really that as local authorities and councils, we're not necessarily,
whilst we all want to do the right thing, and we can all see how we, the benefits of doing the right thing, we are also quite limited sometimes, because actually, for instance, in the carbon production of that data, it's not necessarily really making a difference when the calculation is based on spend, which a lot of the moment is. So we are very governed by central government, obviously, and there's definitely a requirement on us to produce data in certain ways, and in a comparable way with other councils across the country. So some of those questions, I think, around how are you going to develop, how are you going to do this sustainably, is there scope for local nuances, etc. There absolutely is, but as local authorities, our drivers sometimes, unfortunately, move away from the core of what we're trying to get to and what we all know is the right thing, because we are kind of sidetracked by the fact that government want us to produce a return on something, and maybe to tick the boxes correctly or to fill that data incorrectly doesn't necessarily get to the heart of what we want to get to. And I think that's a challenge that as councils we definitely face, and as someone passionate about saving the environment, for instance, it's, I find it very frustrating that we do a lot of our calculations around specifically on carbon around how much we spend, and the calculations based on how much we spend, which we all know isn't necessarily the heart of the matter. So it was just making that point, really.
Thank you very much for making that, and that does tie in with points made earlier as well about biodiversity, as Amy was pointing out. Do things get calculated on that, and if so, how? So yeah, we do appreciate those limitations, and I think there is also a national dialogue to have, isn't there, which it's very difficult for councils on their own to take account of. Okay, well, thank you very much.